Hello Internet, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be looking at this article that I've seen on The Guardian about the British Council. Now, if you're not aware, the British Council is the English teaching arm of the Foreign Commonwealth Office. It's part of a governmental department that operates abroad to try and foster connections between countries and the UK. It's essentially offering educational opportunities for young learners as well as adults in terms of language education. That's right, Daisy. And today I saw this article about the British Council and their operations with online teachers. And the British Council has always been a beacon of professionalism, reputation, and once you're in the British Council, working, teaching, face-to-face classes, you have the opportunity to get into positions of authority, travel around the world, teach English in different countries, and become part of their network. And then since the pandemic, obviously, as with many organisations, there was a shift towards online education, and English education seemed to have the potential around the world, connecting up professional teachers, qualified, experienced teachers, to teach a variety of classes to either young learners as well as adult students. Excuse me, my cat is annoying me. I'm going to read the headline of this news article just to set the scene. British Council accused of forcing gig economy teachers into feed-in frenzy for work. So, for those that don't know, if you want to become an English teacher and work at the British Council, you need to have either the Cambridge CELTA certificate or the equivalent, like the Trinity Cert TESOL. Obviously, the vast majority of English language teachers working at the British Council have the CELTA, but they also have the other qualification like the Cambridge Delta or the Trinity DIP TESOL. For me, I had the opportunity to work at the British Council in Romania, at Bucharest, for about 9 months, and it was a short-lived experience, but it gave me a bit of an insight into the organisation. It was very professional, it was very well organised, and I had the chance to meet very well experienced, qualified teachers, and it was an inspiring place to work at. It's always been the reputation that if you want to get a very well recognised job, then the British Council is going to be that potential employer. Now, when the British Council started opening up positions for online remote employment to work with their online teaching platform, it seemed to generate some interest because you could get into the British Council club, so to say. And when the pandemic came, there was a real charge to get some teachers to get, to be employed, and a lot of teachers wanted to become and work for the British Council in the arm of online English teaching. You still needed all the qualifications required, and there's the educational university education that you first need. You need the CELTA, which you have to pay for yourself to become an English language teacher for the British Council. A Delta or equivalent, again, that's not very cheap, it's quite expensive. And then some teachers would end up getting an MA or a PhD, and then that would be it. Now, when the British Council opened their doors for online education, there was a lot of interest because of how reputable and professional the British Council are perceived. Unfortunately, this article which I'm reading calls that into question, which is a shame. There has been a real drive since the pandemic towards the casual employment, or Uberfication, I guess, of employment, particularly in education. I was very fortunate to have worked with an educational agency to go into schools and be there to help as a teaching assistant in the state schooling system. Apologies for the various vehicles driving past, they're kind of noisy sometimes. Anyhow, there's been a real drive towards agencies and teachers being employed by agencies, and the British Council saw fit that you have to apply to work for the British Council as an online teacher, but through an agency. You're not actually working directly with the British Council. So let's have a look at this article and see what is happening. The British Council has been accused of exploiting hundreds of agency teachers on 0-hour contracts, forced to compete for lessons in a feeding frenzy every week. 0-hour contracts. For those in the UK, a 0-hour contract means that you're employed, but 0 hours. There's no guarantee for hours every week, which means if you don't get any hours, you don't earn. And there was a lot of casual employment being offered in the form of 0-hour contracts, and no guarantee, no support. If you were needed, great, you earned money, but it amounts to a lot of stress for many people in the UK, because you're not guaranteed particular hours, you're not guaranteed a certain salary. It's just, if we need you, we need you, and we'll call you immediately, and you need to be available all the time. The advantage for businesses is that during sort of periods of the year, when it's busy, you can rely on people coming in. When it's not busy, you don't need to employ them directly and guarantee particular hours, and they're dispensable, I suppose, which is a stress for many people. Let's go back to the article then. So, an open letter from teaching staff reveals a prestigious government-funded public body does not offer regular hours to tutors on its popular English online platform, which provides lessons to more than 45,000 students worldwide. So, regular hours. If you were working for the British Council directly, you would be offered regular hours, holiday entitlement, and all of that sort of thing. If you're working on a 0-hour contract through an agency to work with the British Council, the name of the British Council, you're not. You're going to be working for an agency, and you're just another cog in the wheel. You're another piece of the pawn. You're just another person to fill in the gap. Instead, up to 350 teachers based in the UK, US, Canada, Australia, and India have to race each other to book fluctuating numbers of classes released every week, which is referred to by staff as the feeding frenzy. So not only are you not guaranteed hours, but you have to try and, get the hours ahead of everybody else. How unfair is that? If you're going to be based in India, you're going to be a few hours ahead of people in the UK. And if you're in the US, you're going to be behind. And, the time difference alone, once the hours are released. So here's a quote. Often all available classes are gone in minutes. This means that if you're teaching or having computer problems when the hours are released, you can end up with no lessons at all. The letter states, which has been coordinated by the TEFL Workers Union, this Uberfication of teaching needs to stop. Let's just sink that in. You've got Uber, which is the very popular taxi ride-in service available around the world, and you've got education. At no point had I ever considered education teaching, English language teaching, to be on par with Uber when it comes down to how much effort you spend in becoming a teacher, how much you invest in your education and your training. Then why is it okay for organisations as reputable as the British Council to treat teachers that way? You know, the Uberfication of teaching. It's terrible. Teachers used to be directly employed by the British Council, which is funded by the Foreign Office to foster good cultural relations with other countries. But after the pandemic, the Council's commercial arm, which generates £700 million annually, started recruiting teachers via partner agencies. So no longer are you employed directly by the British Council, you're employed by just an agency. And what's the main aim for agencies? To have that commission. It doesn't matter how qualified you are, it doesn't matter how experienced you are, you're there to just fill in the gap, and the agency gets a commission, a bonus. So it comes as the government pushes ahead with legislation to ban exploitative zero-hour contracts. So the government itself is now trying to remove zero-hour contracts, which were introduced many years ago. Ministers announced this month that firms will have to offer agency workers a contract that guarantees a minimum number of hours every week to stop employers evading restrictions. There are growing concerns about the exploitative gig economy practices spreading into new sectors of the economy and professional jobs. Unions have warned that modern types of casualisation pioneered by Uber and Deliveroo are creeping into the high street shops and education, with even Oxford University now putting academics on gig-style contracts. There was a teacher here in the article who's quoted, but asked not to be named, said at first the British Council gave her the option to work regular hours. I wasn't worried about paying bills when I started in 2021. It felt like a proper job. While she was on maternity leave, the British Council stopped for offering guaranteed hours. She said she was left without any income for a month when she returned to work. She then compares her employment with her partner, who works in a bar. So she said, to get this job, I had to show copies of my master's and teaching diploma, which took years to get, but I am paid less and less predictably than my partner, who works in an entry-level bar job. Very insulting. So, let's have a look at how much these online teachers are working for with the British Council, and well, through an agency with the British Council. It goes on here. Some are left with only a couple of lessons each week, which pay £13 for an hour-long group lesson and £7.50 for 30 minutes. One teacher complains that these days I rarely get them more than a couple of lessons. Another notes that every other class I clicked on was already assigned, which was demoralising and humiliating. A teacher with primary school age children said she was forced to book late night classes at 10 and 11 p.m. because they were the only slots available, and it left her too tired to function the next day. So £13 an hour, that's how much they're valued when it comes down to teaching English for the English online platform with the British Council. How insulting, you know? There was a time when I first started teaching in the UK, when I returned back, that an hour of class, and my hourly rate was around £19 per hour, and that was back in 2009, I think, around £19 an hour. Now it's gone down. It's gone down to, 50-minute class being £13 an hour. How does that make sense? And where's the motivation to get into this profession? Why would people invest so much money and time and effort into becoming qualified as an English language teacher by the British Council standards and all that, just to be paid less than I was getting paid in 2009? It just doesn't make sense. So it's sad, really. It really is sad. And these sort of 0-hour contracts, it's so frustrating, and particularly when you work for the British Council, there's certain expectations and there's certain standards that you've got to upkeep. But now, why would you go through all that responsibility just to get paid £13 an hour? It really is frustrating, and unfortunately, that is becoming the norm, and it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be like that. It's so frustrating. But anyway, I just wanted to make today's video because it kind of highlighted the aspects in language education where potential teachers could be taken advantage of, particularly in this new era where there's been a huge push by the British Council and various other organisations for online education. And why isn't online education being considered as serious as maybe in-class teachers? Why isn't it? Why? There's certainly a divide between how much you get paid online for the British Council. £13 an hour, regardless of your qualifications. That's insulting. And when it comes down to face-to-face classes, you get paid more. But why? Why is there that divide? It just doesn't make sense. Obviously, it's all to do with money. Obviously, the British Council have their funding issues. But you've got to reward people for their hard work, their effort. Otherwise, they're not going to take it. You're going to be shedding all these staff that have given their time to learn the platform, to teach online, to teach kids, adults, whoever, for the British Council, that recognised status. But then it's just frustrating. It really is. You would think education would be one point where people wouldn't take it as a commercial interest. Why is it geared by profit when education is such a requirement for anybody? If I didn't have my education, I wouldn't be in the position that I am in now. I invested in my education, and you've got to have a return on that investment. Otherwise, what's the point? And it's so sad that the British Council are looking at reducing costs and shedding teachers, changing contracts, working through agencies, where agencies are just interested in the money. It's sad. Anyway, that's today's rant. Apologies for bringing that into everybody's feed, but it's rather frustrating when it comes down to the British Council forcing teachers into this feeding frenzy. Hopefully things will change and things will improve. Hopefully the British Council will listen. I'm going to finish off now today's video. If you've got any comments, or if you've taught for the British Council, the English online platform, share your experiences. How was it for you? I was fortunate enough not to have taught on that platform. By the sounds of it, it sounds very stressful. Yeah. Anyway, take it easy. I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.